Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's seminar of the Living Earth Collaborative and Washington University's Evolution, Ecology, and Population Biology program. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Kyra Krakos. Dr. Krakos is an associate professor of biology and the program director for the sustainability program at Maryville University and is a research associate at the Missouri Botanical Garden. She is also a biodiversity fellow with the Living Earth Collaborative and a Plant Humanities Fellow with Dumbarton Oaks. Dr. Krakos is currently serving a 3-year elected chair of the teaching section of the Botanical Society of America. She was named Science Educator of the Year by the St. Louis Academy of Science in 2016 and teaches courses in ecology, plants and people, evolution, conservation and sustainability, and botany. Her lab focuses on 3 main areas of research that emphasize the need to understand the dynamics of the natural world in a changing environment. First, she studies the evolution and ecology of plant reproduction, including plant-pollinator interactions and breeding systems. Second, she is the PI for the Maryville Honeysuckle project that is studying local green solutions to invasive species. Finally, she is co-PI on a historic ethnobotanical study that researches the plants of the last ruling Medici, Anna Maria Luisa, in recently translated 17th century archived records. Dr. Krakos did both her undergraduate and master's in integrative biology at Brigham Young University, where her thesis work focused on the impacts of invasive species on the pollination systems of several tropical plant species. Thereafter, she did her doctoral work at Washington University, focusing on the ecology and evolution of plant reproductive biology using Oenothera as a study system. Dr. Krakos is a member of the Botanical Society for America, American Women in Science, and served as the co-director of the Missouri State Junior Science, Engineering, and Humanities Symposium from 2012 to 2016. She has received funding from the NSF, BSA, Sigma Xi, American Women in Science, National Geographic, and the USDA. You can also find her TEDx talk from 2015 online titled Plants, People, and Pollinators, A Love Story. And with that, I will hand things over to Dr. Krakos.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I do apologize for my hoarse voice. I do teach quite a bit, and it is that point in the semester where my abilities to not be hoarse sort of run out. So yes, all the tea and honey, but it's still, it's a bit husky. So I do apologize for that. But I'm excited to be here with you guys today. I'm going to quickly get my screen sharing on and that over. Today I wanted to talk to you about an area called Plant Humanities, which is sort of a new term for a very old idea. And the way that I'm using that concept to help get beyond what I call the wall of green, or the sort of way that people tune out the importance of plants by using cross-discipline approaches. Matt did a very lovely introduction of what I do, but what I kind of wanted to emphasize was that I wear a lot of hats, and yet all of them involve teaching. And I primarily teach undergrads. The institution I'm at is an undergrad education program. And so I don't have master's or graduate students. And it means also that all of my research is done by undergraduates. So I view research very much as a way, as a teaching tool, as an education tool, to turn undergraduates into scientists, just to kind of frame out the perspective that I'm coming from. Okay, so we're going to open with a little exercise. I'm going to show you a picture, and just, I guess we don't really have a chat to share, but if you like, toss in the first thing that you notice or see. Maybe this is your thing, or, which is pretty cute. It's a pretty cute baby dog. Or maybe this is more you. I'm allergic to cats, so I will tell you that the first thing I see here is daffodils. But this is the most common slide that's used as a quote diagnosis. And what they're diagnosing is what they call plant blindness. Oh, this is an old and now kind of out of date term, but I want to give a little history to that. Most people, when they see this picture and they say, what is this a picture of? They say monkeys. Plants are not the first thing that they pay attention to. So for over 100 years, botanists and educators alike have lamented the disparities in attention towards plants and animals. Animals always get higher billing. Different terms have been used to describe this phenomenon, of course, but in about 1919, when the first general biology courses were being developed, the two professors coined the term plant blindness. And it's because they noticed that biology and zoology were basically interchangeable in the curricula. And so they started using this, but then the term really got used quite a bit in the 1990s. I prefer, and I think more accurate and correct, is plant awareness disparity, or PAD. In 2020, Catherine Parsley suggested this in an article in New Phytologist, and I quite like it for several reasons. First, PAD emphasizes that plants are not completely unseen, but rather placed in the background in the visual service of noticing other organisms. PAD also doesn't get into the part where we're now using a disability as a metaphor. So it removes the ableism associated with the term plant blindness. So I really like that as a better term that captures more of what we mean when we talk about it. So plant awareness disparity, regardless of what you call it, I think we can all agree that it is the plants that are underappreciated, which leads to consequences spanning from ecosystem collapse to poor rates of funding for botanists. And in effect, the recognizing and calling it out in education is a way to try and address it. And just in case that maybe this isn't a thing, just this past weekend, we had a little burst of beautiful weather. I was sitting out with some neighbor friends, and one of them asked me the strangest question. I guess there was something they binged on Netflix in which a girlfriend kills somebody using a plant that was in her garden. And they said, well, that's silly. I mean, why would you grow deadly plants? And could you really have a deadly plant growing in your garden? And I laughed out loud. I went, oh my goodness. Oh, my sweet neighbor. There are so many things. She's like, so this isn't unrealistic? I said, no, that's very accessible. All of the deadly things that grows right there in our gardens. I will tell you my two favorites as a former Californian would be oleander or aconitum. And we're sitting around this in the backyard. And I said, I think it'd be, this would be my choice if I had to, take someone out killing with a plant. And my husband just is like, so nice being married to her. It's so restful. But cheerfully, it's not, it's very possible that a plant could kill you, was my point. I'm pretty sure this is then how my neighbors see. And that's fair. I love to talk about all the things plants do for us and what makes them important. Humans rely on plants for our most fundamental individual and social needs, from food, medicine, construction, our encounters with them in art and literature. We make musical instruments out of them. And although we think of plants as rooted in a single place, plants move quite a bit across time and space and really come into our understanding of our patterns of food and consumption. More currently, they play these key roles in our understanding and addressing the issues of climate change, habitat loss, and of course, accelerated species extinction, all adding to this urgency of understanding our relationship to the natural world and acknowledging the importance of plants in our environment. So how do we make the humans care? Why we want them to make the humans care about plants? And this is where it gets tough, right? Because plants don't have big eyes and fuzzy faces. And as an educator, I'm especially sensitive to this when I ponder this question. I get a room full of 18-year-olds and they deeply, deeply do not care about plants. And I have goals. I have a lot of goals in making sure that the next generation cares a great deal about the natural world and plants specifically. So the learning styles of Homo sapien is very interesting because we tend to teach or convey our information to each other as if we were robots. And we go, here's the data, data in, data out, bullet points, very structured. And that's great for trying to understand and communicate in science. But getting humans to care about plants or to speak to a bunch of undergraduates, we have to kind of take a different approach, or rather frame it in ways that gets them to take that content in at a deeper level. Connecting to our humanity is key for making science important. And one of the key ways that humans learn is by stories. It's stories that help us connect our lived experiences to content or data. And there's kind of two reasons for this. And this is really, really old, very deep in our culture. One, I guess at the end of the day, we are all about ourselves. We love to hear stories about ourselves. We just celebrated my daughter's 13th birthday. And maybe this is true for many of you. On your birthday with your children, they love to hear the story of the day they were born, and all about how they got here. So those are important to humans. They help us anchor our identities and who we are and our place in things. And then also, we can layer a lot of information on top of narratives. And so it's not surprising this is a very old learning style. So I mentioned this phrase, putting this into a discipline called Plant Humanities. And I like this because it is now connecting the human side with the plant side in a single narrative. So while this is a newly named sort of term being thrown around, it is not one that's new, although it is a new area for me to be working on. So it very much obviously is cross-discipline. Cross-disciplinary learning is not new. These approaches have worked for a long time. It's deeply beneficial to teach in a cross-discipline way because it encourages higher motivation and deeper understanding. It's an approach that helps the experience become more accessible as you transfer ideas across different fields of studies. And that can create a more meaningful learning experience actually to any age. It's really talked about a lot about in early education, but I found that it's just as effective in young adults and adults. And then later it lets them reflect on their gained knowledge and easily apply problem-solving ideas from their class in a real-world situation, or later on in developing critical thinking skills. It keeps those connections and interrelations open to further layer in learning deeper into life. It also is helpful to study disciplines with foreign methodologies that are just, not your wheelhouse, not your thing. I found this to be very true as I partnered up with my collaborators who were in different disciplines, where like with one of my main collaborators, she's a historian, and things that she took for granted. I was History 101, gosh, that's a gen ed pretty deep in my background, and having to sort of break down and readdress was really good for me to do and to understand. And on the flip side, with her, I was like, I would just sail in on my assumed knowledge about like plant anatomy, a stigma or a stamen. And she's like, whoa, hang on a second. Let's talk about if plants are sexual. That's a really new idea for me. And so as we collaborated, it really promoted this cross-discipline learning, and learning those new methodologies forced us into reevaluation and sort of deeper critical thinking skills. So I tried to pull that into my teaching on every level. So while there's still deep layers of details, we're always pulling back to that big picture. And there's lots of really good examples in the studies of physics and music, politics and ecology, where cross-discipline approaches have been very, very powerful. The intersection of art and science has a really long history, and botany in particular has a really long history there. It's been at it for much, and it's stuck with it for much, much longer than the other sciences. And I understand that. For the longest time, you could travel the world and bring back a stuffed collection of an animal, but harder to do with a plant. So an artist who could truly render the details of the anatomy of a plant was vital to a team and understanding the biology of a species that was somewhere else in the world. During the late 18th century, the Age of Enlightenment, the relationship between artists and science strengthened. There was the collaboration of two very important men, the Swedish naturalist Carl Linnaeus and the artist George Ehert. I'm not sure I'm saying his name correctly. The result in the publication of such important texts, such as the Table of the Sexual System of Plant Classification in 1736, which illustrates Linnaeus's innovative system of botanical classification. It is still followed today and was by many considered quite scandalous. And my own research has been very cross-discipline in its approaches as well. I collaborate with artists, I collaborate with historians, and I use those as teaching tools for then research projects with the undergraduates in an effort to tap into their humanity connecting to the sciences. So they give you a quick summary of two of those cross-discipline undergraduate projects as case studies. And if either of these really interests you, really tickles your fancy, you can hit me up for much further details. The first of these was the Honeysuckle project. And this really capitalized on the intersection of art and science, or botany and science. We're looking at the invasive species and decided to explore it as an artistic medium by understanding its botanical features better. So it was really organic. The students and I, we went out to the woods around Maryville, which are quite invaded by the bush honeysuckle, stripped it down, dragged it into the hallways. I should point out that I did this during a dean's retreat, so there were not a lot of administrators on campus, which worked out well for me because we made a giant mess. We looked at the ways the different layers of phloem and bark stripped off and how deep it went, and found that the fibers of it, you can see these large piles of it here, were actually really strong and light, and could be very useful for multiple mediums, not just in art, but as a resource for basketry and other things. And so we got a hold of artists in the area, not just the students and also designers, and held a series of workshops and explored the plant as a medium for construction and for art. And we held an art show at the end of it called Bauhaus Botany, in keeping with the theme of putting the two fields together. The Bauhaus movement, I didn't know this at the time, but the artist I was working with said, oh, these workshops where you explore a medium, that's very Bauhaus. That's very what the Bauhaus movement did. So we held a show called Bauhaus Botany. We featured several local artists. And I would say, we did this for 2 years, I would say to give you an idea of how far they explored this, this dress, couture, designed and built by one of the design students in Maryville's program, entirely out of honeysuckle. She wove it, she flattened it, she cut discs and tied those together. And it was eventually showcased in the Green Fashion Show of St. Louis in 2018, which was downtown. And here was the exciting part. This was an art show that not just the usual crowd concerned about invasive species would come to. It tapped into a whole different set of people who were excited about art and innovation and so forth. And now, in fibers, and now they were sipping wine, drinking desserts, marveling at some of these art pieces, and also learning about bush honeysuckle. And repeatedly at these art shows we'd hear, oh, this beautiful plant is a problem. Well, my goodness, I didn't know. And it opened up new avenues for education, which was always our goal. The other cross-disciplinary research is, as Matt had mentioned, the Medici project. And this one, although I pair up with my historian collaborator, this combines botany, history, politics, chemistry, a little forensic murder. And this is an entire giant project, but the summary of it is that between the Medici archives, where these recipes were found, and Missouri Botanical's rare books collection, we're able to look at the 200 pharmaceutical recipes of the last Medici princess, Anna Maria Medici. And there's a picture of her here. Again, it is research that interests not just the usual crowd of plant folks. So Anna Maria ruled as a single female for over 20 years using soft power. And she did a lot of that by trading her knowledge of plants and medicinal plants and the medicines made in her family's pharmacias or pharmacies that the Medici have been making for over 100 years, and turning that into political power, trading that for political power. So for instance, if you were rich and powerful and the Duke of Milan, and you had troops that she was very interested in helping maintain her power, Anna Maria might send you a little collection like this, a little kit with several of her recipes in them. And they would come with a, here's how to prepare or take and what they're good for. And it would have her ducal seal on them. And then we have these exchanges between her and these heads of state, thanking her for these medicines and then promising her support for her rule in return. The most famous of her recipes centered on this plant, this peony plant. I'm going to show it to you. This is my collaborator, Ashley Buchanan. I'm sitting in the archives doing research. I snapped this photo. I don't know about the rest of the ecologists out there, but I never once in my life have looked like that while doing research, but apparently historians do. This is the recipe, and she was translating it for me. And it does refer to peony roots and seeds. Here's a translation, sort of a summary of it. The precipitation of a pulverized skull of a man who died violently but was never buried. Oriental pearls, red and white coral, yellow amber, and peony roots and seeds. And then my job was to, in the index of her shipping records and of the ecology at the time, figure out which of the 47 peonies that are out there she is referring to. And we did figure that out. And then would it work? And it would have. It acted a lot like aspen. So it contains albiflorin and peoniflorin, and these two compounds would reduce fevers and very likely help out with infant diseases. But of course, it has some very exciting things in there. The pearls and coral very much speak to the types of, and I only know this because I'm hanging out with historians, but the types of medicinal schools that Anna Maria would have been paying attention to. And then the skull was a fun talking point when I would discuss this in different areas. But, and this is sort of, this is why I like working with undergrads, because it does have this intriguing ingredient. They always just go for that. But a couple of months ago, I had two students who started kicking around the idea of testing if the skull served a function. And as we sort of were discussing this, went, well, the skull is calcium carbonate, and it could have stabilized the peony compounds for the journey. We do have a record of when it was shipped and when it was received. So the first thing they did was they went into the historical archives and figured out, had to calculate how long the compound would have to travel. And then just this past week, we finally had all the pieces we needed. We had peony officinalis, which is the seeds. We had the roots, and we had skull. They'd done some homework on this and realized that cow skull had this sort of similar collagen ratios that we would need. And there's some exciting moments where we dragged it out to the quad and hacked it up. And there's a lot of grinding and cleaning and sonicating. And the first round of the comparing with and without skull samples is in the HPLC, with the idea that after 12 weeks, we'll have some nice graphs that show HPLC retention times with and without skull. So it's a great, very clean sort of biochemistry undergrad experiment. It's going to be a really exciting talk for them to give at their undergrad symposium. It's got such a great hook. It has such a great story. So you're giving a biochem talk on plants, you're not going to get much of a crowd. But if it's got skulls and Medici's, there's a really interesting story that it centers around. I will say, now that I've dragged a cow head into the freezer to be stored, the lab managers have ceased to be surprised at anything they've been asked to deal with in the botany lab. It's rough for them. Okay, so talk about plant humanities in the classroom. Not necessarily the research, because the research really is honestly something I do on the side. But this is where I spend the bulk of my time. I teach 5 classes every semester. I'm on a 5-5 contract. And I teach a lot of the workhorse biology classes. And then I also do have my own set of plant classes. And I keep increasing them. When I first arrived at Maryville 10 years ago, it was just botany. And it was offered every other year, once a year. I added in plants and people, in ethnobotany. We've added in sustainable agriculture. There's a wait list now for the plant classes. This fall, I add a class called Plant Humanities. So I am holding and expanding the thin green line. So some of my tricks of the trade that connect humans to plants. And I'll breeze through some of these very quickly because within the classroom, there are things that probably a lot of us know and use. But for a lot of you who are grad students or postdocs and looking to be at an institution where you teach, some of these are things to keep in mind. So obviously, there's a lot of pop culture I put into my slides or into my as class themes. The students today, Gen Z, they all grew up with Pixar, so Wall-E and Nemo are everywhere in there. Botany has a great history in cinema. It always makes for a great intro on day one. Maybe not all of you realize this, but for me as a kid in the 80s, this really mattered. This E.T. was a big moment for me. E.T. was a botanist. That's why he was late getting on the ship. That's how he got stuck on planet Earth. Go back and watch the first 5 minutes. He just has to get that one last plant. And I get it, we've all been there. We had a really good moment, botany did, with Harry Potter. Neville turned out to be a real hunk. That was great for us. We don't usually get those. We sort of got a superhero with the Marvel Universe. I'm not sure if Groot counts, but it's slim pickings, so we'll take it. By far our biggest win was the astronaut botanist of Art Watney. But pop culture, I should warn you, does age quickly. So you have to be fairly nimble. My secret weapon, of course, is that 13-year-old daughter of mine. I try to check things out with my tweens. They won't lie to me. And if they look confused or their eyes roll back in their head, then I know some solid feedback that's not going to work. I had a solid fail recently in fall 2020. I made some joke about creating something in the lab using only coconuts. And they just stared at me. It was awful. They don't know Gilligan's Island. Moving on. But a lot of times it's just the part where you package things in a story where regardless of whether they watch the show Top Chef or not, they don't need to. So for instance, here was a lab assignment that I had. It was a lab practical. And it was getting right to the bias of the fact that of the way that undergrads and the general population sees plants. So they had gone to the Missouri Botanical Garden and gone through the Climatron 2 other times, doing other assignments with plant ID and introduction to plant structures and some ethnobotany, but mostly on plant structures. And they found the species we were looking for, and they'd oohed and awed at the rainforest Climatron and all of this. And then I took them there towards the end of the semester, and I handed them this assignment. That was the only instruction they got. And they completely freaked out because they just saw the green wall. They didn't see food. They didn't see that this is a pantry. And I said, if you want to saute something, you better find a plant that can provide an oil. And I will say every year that I do this, they freak out and then they rally and then they get some really amazing results. This last time I gave this assignment, they gave me a alcohol pairing with each dish. That was really quite impressive. But overall, it pushed the students into active learning, into not just spitting back out the plant anatomy they've learned, but really critically thinking as they looked at the plant, well, what could this be used for? How have humans used it? And really directly addressing that PAD, the green wall, oh my goodness, all I see is I don't see what's at the ecology or practicality of the plant. I regularly use multimedia in my classrooms. I build discussions and assignments around these. I have just a couple that might interest you or that might be of useful resource. I will warn you that the last one, Crime Pays but Botany Doesn't, is not PG. So for delicate ears or if you clutch your pearls, that's not the one for you. He's called, it's Joey Santori, and he calls himself a botanist serving up plants with Chicago style. I think he's fantastic. The students find him fantastic, but it's, be mindful of your audience at the time. My favorite thing is that he has a ruler tattooed on his finger so he can measure plants in the field at any time. That's legend. I also highly recommend the Plants Are Cool Too, both YouTube channel and podcast. Chris Martin is a gifted educator, and they travel the world, and they're in nice small bites that you can build a discussion around or use as an intro, etc. But directly getting to the stories part, there are also plant stories sharing sites. And I've made these into assignments in my own class. These are the two, Herbaria 3.0 and Plant Love Stories, that are, I would say, the richest repositories of plant stories. I particularly like the Herbaria 3.0 because on the side has what they call the story garden, and then it's arranged by inspiration and types of plants. Nothing combats PAD like our own human stories. Plants can be a really tough sell, but with stories, when we connect into our lived experience, we can get there. Just this past fall, I had 22 students in a class complete and submit their own plant story to Plant Stories. And one of the most touching was a young athlete whose mother advised him to address his pregame anxiety by growing a fern in his dorm room that she gave him. And he really artfully wove together this story of practices and sports and caring for this fern and realizing how wise his mother's counsel was and being very transparent about his own anxieties into a very powerful story that was kind of unexpected and particularly impactful with his classmates. So many of these ideas and resources are known, like I said, and used by you already. So tonight I'm excited to share with you a new resource in Plant Humanities. And it comes out of this initiative that was funded in 2018 by the Mellon Foundation with a sister grant at JSTOR Labs to advance the Plant Humanities. It's centered at Dumbarton Oaks and is sister and partner with Harvard University. Their mission, the initiative, is to advance the field of plant humanities by creating a platform that integrates primary sources, botanical illustrations, rare books, manuscripts, herbaria specimens, scientific publications, etc., and online resources such as global plants and the Biodiversity Heritage Library, and then secondary literature in order to narrate and foster the exploration of the cultural histories and influences of plants. It has sort of three parts to it. One is using Juncture, which is a new open source tool developed by JSTOR Labs. And in my fellowship, that's what I was trained in to use to build these visual plant narratives. And you can also build those visual plant narratives, you use them as an assignment in a class, which I'll circle back to. So you'd use these plant narratives either as a seed or to build your own introduction in a class too, but then all to create interest in plant humanities, but then also having the students create their own visual essays where they're the ones building and coding a cross-disciplinary essay. And then this initiative also funded the summer fellowships that we used to develop curriculum and train on the platform. That was the fellowship that I was part of. I was in their first cohort in July 2021 to put together scientists, artists, historians, all these folks in humanities together to create collaborations between the disciplines to create curriculum in particular, and then also these narratives. And of course, I mean, I love a residency because it creates space away from our lives to create and focus. Of course, then COVID hit, and so it became all virtual, so boo. Nonetheless, it was still a wonderful 2 weeks spent with some brilliant and inspiring creative folks to really do some exciting things. So this is the landing pad for the Plant Humanities Lab. And we created courses around them. If you're interested in having like the curriculum where like, you're like, oop, I just want to teach an entire class, the readings, the discussion points, the entire syllabi, we built those out and those are available as we released out. But we also trained on this new source and Juncture and the coding platform. The link to the Plant Humanities Lab, this site, is in the YouTube chat. But I'm going to give you like a brief overview. of that. And to get my poor little voice a rest, my collaborator, Ashley, is actually going to be the voice of walking you through how this resource works.
Welcome to the Plant Humanities Lab. The Plant Humanities Lab is an innovative digital space that lets you explore the cultural histories of plants through visual narratives and related historical resources, such as rare historical books, manuscripts, and artworks, as well as taxonomic data, herbarium specimens, scholarly articles, and so much more. In addition to highlighting how plants have shaped human societies throughout history, the Plant Humanities Lab also creates an engaging, interdisciplinary, and collections-based platform that allows students and the public to engage with today's urgent questions on environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, and the legacies of colonialism and capitalism. So let's see how the Plant Humanities Lab works. The homepage highlights the site's two major components. The first, in the banner near the top of the screen, is a dynamic search tool powered by linked open data. The second, just below the search banner, provides you access to a series of visual plant narratives, where each narrative focuses on a particular plant's rich and fascinating history through time and across cultures. Let's explore the visual narratives. Simply click on the title, and underneath the banner image, you'll see the title and author of the narrative. To the right of this are two buttons, a Cite This Essay and a More Resources button. The Cite This Essay allows you to quickly retrieve the citation information for the essay in multiple formats. We will return to the More Resources button shortly. Each visual narrative is made up of text on the left-hand side of the screen and interactive visuals on the right. One or more interactive visuals accompany each paragraph, and the type of visualization is indicated by an icon in the top right-hand corner of the active paragraph. To activate the first paragraph, simply begin scrolling. The banner image will shrink and the first paragraph's visualization will enlarge. All images in the visual narratives are IIIF, which makes them fully interactive. You can zoom in and out, as well as pan to various sections of the image. In addition to exploring an image on your own, IIIF images can also be connected to text within the paragraph, annotated, and compared, either side by side or with a curtain slider. For every image, you will see a vertical menu along the right side of the viewer. This allows you to zoom in and out, as well as reset the image. If the image has annotations, a play button will also appear. Clicking the play button will activate the annotations. The menu's information button will display the image's label, source, IIIF manifest, and URL. Maps within the visual narratives are also interactive. You can zoom and pan freely, and like the image and text interaction, places and regions highlighted in the text can be connected to points and areas of the map. Simply hover over the highlighted location in the text and watch the map move. Maps also feature overlays, which can be turned on and off. The overlays can include shapes defining a plant's distribution, pinpoints highlighting places of note associated with a plant, historical maps, and animations that will autoplay when you activate a paragraph or initiate through a control bar. Finally, the visualizations also include a herbarium viewer, which pulls herbarium specimens from JSTOR Global Plants, interactive network visualizations, timelines, tables, charts, and videos. Using these visualizations, you will learn about and come to appreciate the extraordinary significance of plants to human cultures through the perspectives of the arts, sciences, and humanities. The Plant Humanities Lab promotes the interdisciplinary study of plants, and it also encourages the public, students, and scholars to research, create, and share plants' unique cultural histories by providing curated primary and secondary sources. It also provides a digital toolkit through which users can acquire digital skills and create their own interactive visual narratives. One of the most exciting features of the Plant Humanities Lab is our search tool, which I mentioned earlier. You can access it from the homepage as well as from each visual plant narrative. Simply click the More Resources button at the top of the essay to learn more about that specific plant. Unlike traditional lexical searches, which look for literal word matches, the Plant Humanities Lab search tool utilizes the power of linked open data. By assigning or connecting attribute value pairs and creating triples, which connects plants and their associated ideas, people, and places, the search tool links structured data and so provides rich and curated search results that cross disciplines, languages, and data sets. For example, if you search agave at a lexical search, you will only get results that contain the word agave. The Plant Humanities Lab, however, has linked agave to early modern European botanical gardens and Nawa spiritual practices through attribute value pairs and triples. And so when you search agave, the results will include the Nahuatl and Spanish words for agave, as well as the Leiden Botanic Garden, the Mesoamerican beverage pulque, contemporary tequila production, and much more, many of which do not contain the word agave, but have important historical and cultural connections to the agave plant. Through interactive, scholar-authored visual narratives and powerful search tools focused on rich plant databases, like the Biodiversity Heritage Library and JSTOR Global Plants, the Plant Humanities Lab illuminates the cultural histories of plants across a range of perspectives, historical periods, and geographies. It also highlights important special collections, rare books, and plant databases to mobilize the use of these materials for new scholarship and public audiences. You will find more information on the lab's inception, contributors, and help using the platform in the hamburger menu located in the top right-hand corner of the site's header. We hope you enjoy discovering the cultural histories of plants.
Okay, that gave me a little bit of rest, so thank you for that. As you can see, this is a really rich resource, and as you explore these narratives, and we're adding more to the new ones all the time, they're a great way to hook in students or the general public because they are visual and because they do center around stories. I also like that they're not simply Eurocentric in their approach to the plants. We're trying to capture more and more of the global knowledge throughout history. That they're interactive seems to keep people engaged a lot longer, which is also really important. And then one other thing I wanted to highlight was that make sure you do the timelines where they scroll across. It's going to often be a way to talk about more difficult issues, but using a plant story and have a chance for a conversation that might not usually happen and have some learning happen in a way that sometimes people's defenses might hop up prior to that. In particular, the one on Dittany and humans' reproductive history is fascinating. I highly recommend. And you saw, of course, one of them is, of course, on our beloved peony with its powdered skull. The interface with its very interesting way of searching and linking structured data is incredibly powerful, particularly for students realizing how interconnected disciplines and the experience of plants are. But I've also found it really helpful for myself in building out lesson plans and things like that. Go, oh my goodness, it's the one-stop shop. And it links to Missouri Botanical Garden as well. It links to most of the major garden and libraries around the world. Super helpful. And so hopefully this is something that you guys can use and explore and help connect plant stories to better also. The one I'm working on their own, I'm working on a new plant story right now for a new visual essay, is the one that once we finish the peony, is one on the sago lily. This is quite, they really like us to work on plant narratives that have a personal tie-in. I come from, I'm like 6th generation Mormon pioneer. And so the sago lily is said to have saved the lives of the pioneers when they landed in Utah. In 1846, they arrived to the valley late. They got their crops in the ground late. It was an extra long winter. They had cricket issues. And by 1847, they were starving to death. And so there are oral histories and there are journals that talk about, oh, you know, we learned from the indigenous tribes, they call them Indians, of course, the local people about what we could eat to survive the famine foods. And they mentioned the sago lily. And it became the cherished Utah state flower. The problem is that you dig into the biology of the sago lily and it blooms in May, which is not when they were in trouble or hungry. And it blooms up in the mountains, at the lower edge of the mountains, which I've hiked, and it's not an easy hike. And it grows about 1.5 feet underground. And the Goshen Indians would have used it not as a famine food, but rather as, in the oral histories, they talk about it as a, like a kid's treat, or like candy, little bulbs are sweet. And they'd eat it in early spring. So more likely, what they showed the pioneers how to survive on was thistles. But of course, you look at it, this is the more gorgeous plant, so it gets to be the state flower. And there's a little bit of dark side to this plant story. The sago lily looks very much like a death camas, which is an entirely different family, but every year there's a few dumb Boy Scouts who don't listen to their leaders, and they go, oh, pioneers ate this, and then they get super sick and have to go to the hospital because they thought it was a sago lily. My point is, as we look at our own histories and our own lives, plants play a key role in shaping what that is like. Plants have so many stories, and they can be a way to enhance our engagement and learning in botany and to promote botany as an important and persistent science. Remember that plants never ever disappoint. Thank you. Oh, there's my pioneers. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Kyra, for such a wonderful talk. Great ideas for involving people more in the field of botany. I'll remind our audience here to please leave their questions in the YouTube chat, and we will relay them to our presenter as they come in. We are starting to get some people posting in the live chat here. Brett Seymour says in regards to the honeysuckle dress, he says the dress is just incredible, absolutely brilliant idea. And our first question is from Jonathan Losos, who says, great talk, Kyra. I've had a similar joke fail with Leave It to Beaver. Sad.
Ooh, rough. Well, tell Jonathan I spoke about him today in class. In evolution, we were talking about his anoles, and some of the racier things he's talked about with those lizards, my students loved hearing about. So thank you, Jonathan.
Great. And he follows up on that comment with a question. He wonders, how can members of our community become involved in this cool initiative?
Okay, so first of all, you have the link. Use it. It's, I mean, there you can post it on social media. It's the kind of thing, I feel like we've built something that really captures people's imagination, because you open it, it's not like, oh, it's a plant and a botany thing. It's a visual essay, and they kind of go down different rabbit holes. Folks really like to go down rabbit holes on the internet. And my goal was like, let's try and give them better rabbit holes to go falling down. So I would say share on social media, use in your classrooms. One of the things I'm quite proud of was, and you'll notice that Ashley pointed out, the little just cite button, and it immediately pops up. You can copy and paste in whatever style you need. I had said, that's really important, you guys. If you want people to use this and cite it, like in a classroom, etc., you need to make citation for dummies. It needs to be so easy. Not download it into EndNote, nothing. Make it like pops up, there it is, as easy as possible. And I'm like, are you sure? I'm like, oh, I'm sure. I would need that. Yeah. So I would say that. I would say submit ideas for plant narratives. We got a wonderful one from Amat Daphne, who is a botanist based out of the University of Haifa. He's brilliant. And it was this remarkable, he'd sent a paper and he'd said, I don't know where to publish this. It is ethnobotany, but it has so many visuals and it has like maps and sort of like a history thing. And I was like, I know the exact platform for this. I know exactly where it should be created. So I think that part where introducing it as another way to communicate and link our science in the classroom, and then also just to anybody. I posted on social media several times once it came out, and I've had like, people I know or whatever who do not care for plants. Like they say, Kyra, stop talking about plants, at parties, like you talk about plants enough. They're like, these were cool. Yeah, they're focusing on different things in those essays, right? But what do I care? I don't care if someone shows up to the art show for the cool dress. They're going to learn about an invasive species. Maybe they're there because we're grinding up a skull, but now they're going to learn about peonies. So yeah, it's using the stories to slide some plant knowledge in. So I hope that answers your question. Jonathan, but just promoting the use as a resource on many educational platforms.
Great, wonderful, thank you. So I'll follow up on that with a question of my own, which I really loved your idea of using Honeysuckle as an art project to learn more about, botanical anatomy and ecology. I wonder first, is that Honeysuckle art project ongoing? Is it something you're continuing to do with progressive semesters? And I'd love to hear you elaborate on why Honeysuckle.
So the fun part about working with undergrads is they wander into your office with ideas, and they're not worried about looking dumb to their professor who's going to grade their thesis or have them pass quals or anything else. They're pretty unfiltered. So it was a couple of Green Maryville students, that's the sustainability club, and they said, we're trying to figure out a way to, stage like a honeysuckle poll. And I'm like, yeah, we have those, and so we're like, do some of those sort of things. And they said, but like, nobody really cares about this on campus. So like, we always get the same 10 people. And then they said, but we need money, and there isn't some funding right now that like for what we want to do big removal. They said, so we're wondering if there's anything the honeysuckle, I don't know, could it be like used for anything that could be sold so it can fund its own removal? And I was like, that's brilliant. And so, we got in a room and there was a whiteboard, and the whole honeysuckle project actually comes out of that. They've sold fire starters, they've done a whole bunch of stuff with this. The art shows did end with COVID. But that was one year I said, you know what, we need to explore this a little more aesthetically. Because somebody said, could I use it the way you do raffia? I'm like, I don't know. Let's go drag a tree in here and see what happens. Like the fiber that people tie decoratively. I don't know. I'm not crafty. So I said, well, I'm gonna put a couple artists in my lab and see what happens. And it was great. I did sort of a meta-analysis on the way artists work and the way science students work. And it was interesting because it was very similar. It's actually very similar. Both groups keep notebooks. Both groups iterate to get results. That was really interesting. Oh, and to go back, I thought of something with Losa's question. The platform has been built where it will hook into primary sources, much more technical, scientific literature like scientists would use, and also to the layman who just doesn't, wants to see something interesting. It pulls down to all levels. It's designed for that.
Thank you for that. So I had a question, I think as scientists, we've kind of been stuck in our science realm. And I love this crossover that you have with humanities, and kind of where do you see that going? Are you encouraging other types of biologists within your department, or do you see this kind of going out and having a stronger connection with the humanities?
Yes. So like I said, I've slowly expanded the number of plant classes being taught. And the way I do that is I'm like, look, this one filled, we need another. And I think Plant Humanities will be quite popular as it's an honors course. But I think, once you show people something, okay, so like yesterday, I took some students to see the rare books collection. And I had a student, again, undergraduate, so unfiltered. He told me this morning in class, he said, I gotta say, you were so excited that we were gonna get to go see the rare books collection at the Peter Raven Library. He said, most of us were like, I don't know, I'm gonna go look at some old books, whatever, go to a library. He goes, oh my gosh, that was amazing. We had no idea. And it's right here in St. Louis. And I always feel like it's that if you could you just need one little hook, and then that's it. Personally, my going out into the universe, I teach probably 200 students a year come through my classes. And I do my very best, right, to get them ready for their next step, pre-meds and all the rest of it. But that at least coming out of my classes, they will have gotten a taste of this, that disciplines are connected, that plants are important, that science is not boring, right? And that there's a richer way of approaching the sciences that they can carry through their entire life. I do know, because they report back to me, students of mine that went into secondary ed, they actively come back and ask me for resources like this, training on things like this to use in their high school classes, which is lovely. I love when they come back and check it. And then a month ago, I was contacted by one of the artists that was part of that initiative, and I'll start this summer. She and her team have received a grant, and they're making these, I don't understand artists, it's like a foreign area to me, I'm so sorry, but I think they're called anthophytes, where they use the plants to create photographs and images using the actual plant products as the chemistry for it. And they're doing that, and it's a book that's been commissioned from them, for Emily Dickinson's plants. I didn't know Emily Dickinson had plants, but she had a whole herbarium and garden and collection. And so they said, would you be our botanist who like helps research the 60 plants that she had in her herbarium to write like the interesting human blurb about the plant that goes with our artwork? What an exciting project. Yeah, now it's 60 plants. So the first thing I did was turn it into an undergraduate assignment so I could get some brute force work out of the way. But yeah, we'll be working on that next year. So there's always just sort of getting the word out and some new collaborations that happen.
Great. Well, wonderful ideas. And thank you again, Kyra, for joining us and giving just a wonderful talk today. I think we'll wrap up here as we're approaching time. But thank you again. I think this has been a wonderful addition to our Living Earth Collaborative and Evolution, Ecology, and Population Biology seminar series. So thank you to the audience for tuning in, and thank you again, Kyra, for joining us.
Thank you all so much.